Hi.
Hi.
Shut up, Taylor. Taylor's here. Oh shit. On my phone right there. Say hi.
Hi.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna be. We're.
What?
Shut up. We're gonna be reading more Alec fanfictions today. This one is on Archive of Our Own, which is like the only thing I read fanfictions on. Whoops. By Honeycrown96. Titled Alec's First Breakfast in Bed. Malik. The summary says Magnus is making breakfast in bed for Alec, and he wants it to be special since it's Alec's first breakfast in bed. Here we go. The chirping of the birds was subtle at first. Magnus could still sleep through it because it was like a sweet melody to his ears until it got louder and he couldn't sleep through it anymore. So he flickered his eyes open. He turned to the sleeping young Shadowhunter beside him. Then he smiled at the sight of his face and he caressed his face gently. He didn't even flinch when he noticed he was still deep in his sleep. He got up and he wore his robe and headed to the kitchen to make his lover breakfast in bed. Magnus was humming to a song in his head while picking out the ingredients for pancakes in the kitchen, wearing a deep blue shiny robe. It barely reached his knees. Alec was not so deep in his sleep, with his bare rock-hard abs embracing the sunlight coming from the gap between the dark wine-colored drapes, the bright white sheets covering his unclad waistline down. As he heard the humming from the kitchen, a smile squirmed on his lips while his eyes were still shot. It says shot. Then he rubbed his eyes and stretched his hand to the other side of the bed when he realized no one was there. He opened his eyes, still smiling, then he sat up and wore his boxers and traced the humming sound. Alec walked into the kitchen, still smiling, while Magnus was mixing the pancake mixture in a bowl. Alec placed his arms around Magnus's waist from behind and he started raining kisses on the warlock's neck all the way to his shoulders. Then he took his time to rain kisses on his shoulder. The older warlock grinned and blushed as he held the mixer with one hand and used the other hand to caress the face of the younger Shadowhunter. Alec raised his head and asked, "What are you making? It smells good." Then he resumed back to trailing kisses on his neck. Magnus smirked, then he replied, "Cinnamon pancakes with scrambled eggs and... You do eat eggs, do you?" Alec replied, "Only when they smell this good." Magnus turned slightly to meet his lover's eyes. Alec leaned in to kiss the older warlock slowly and passionately. Their lips parted at a leisurely pace. Magnus said, "It's supposed to be a surprise." Alec was a little confused, then he replied, "Which part of it?" Magnus said, "The whole breakfast." He paused briefly, then he said, "Especially the part where it's in bed." Then he pouted slightly. Alec turned to face him while swaying, then faintly he said, "Babe, how can I make it up to you?" Magnus replied, "By going back to bed." Alec moved his lips to his lover's ear and nibbled at it softly. Then he said in a low, husky tone, "How do you expect me to stay in bed while you're so hard to resist, especially 'cause you taste so good?" Then he tilted his head to the side and used his right hand to turn the older warlock's face to his direction. When their eyes locked, he said, "But I would go back to bed only 'cause you're working so hard on this breakfast, Magnus." He smiled, then replied, "Thanks, darling, for taking my effort into consideration." Then Alec let go of his lover and walked towards the room. When he got to the entrance of the kitchen, he turned around to take one more glance at Magnus's ass. Then he bit his lower lip and smirked and headed straight for the room with excitement in his eyes. Oh Lord, does this turn into smut? I don't think so. I don't know. Alec was sitting with his back leaned on the headboard, one leg straight, the other leg was bent upright, wearing nothing more than his boxers, as Magnus walked in with the tray of delights. He set it in front of Alec. Then the older warlock said, "These are cinnamon pancakes with blueberry syrup, fruit salad, fresh orange juice, and some scrambled eggs. Bon appetit." Alec picked one of the fresh strawberries by the tip and dipped it in the bowl of cream. Then he put part of it in his lover's mouth. Then Alec watched as he chewed it slowly, and then he grinned. Magnus said, "It tastes good, but I want to know what you think." Alec replied, "Where do I start?" He rubbed his palms together and bit his lower lip while staring at Magnus with a sensual allure in his eyes. Then he said, "I would have loved to start with dessert, but I wouldn't want your effort to go to waste." Magnus replied, "Trust me, Alexander, there is always room for dessert after the main dish." Alec smirked, then he poured syrup over a large portion of the pancakes. He folded the first pancake into one bite. Magnus watched him as he took his first bite with hope in his eyes that his boyfriend might make a facial expression to show him what he thought about the pancakes. But Alec was chewing with a blank expression until he closed his eyes and said, This tastes so good, Magnus." Magnus replied, "I know. I've got all sorts of talents." Alec ate up, enjoying each and every bite, while Magnus took slow bites of a bowl of freshly cut fruits, dipping them one at a time into a bowl of cream as he was laying on his tummy, dangling his feet in the air at the edge of the bed. Alec took one last sip of orange juice right about the time Magnus was dipping his last red cherry into the cream. Then he turned to lay on his back before he put the creamy cherry in his mouth. Alec placed his tray on the ground. Then he swooped up on top of Magnus. Then he crawled till his face was right on top of his boyfriend's face while kneeling upright, placing Magnus between his thighs. When their eyes locked, Alec licked his lips and placed a kiss on the older warlock's lips, tasting every inch of his mouth. He came to an abrupt stop. Both their eyes fluttered open steadily. Then Magnus said, "What was that for?" Alec replied, "That's an intro to my thanking you for that delicious breakfast, which happens to be my first breakfast in bed." Magnus giggled. Then Alec licked his lips and pondered over the last taste in his mouth. Then he said, "By the way, that creamy cherry tasted so good." Magnus replied, "There is more where that came from." The younger shadow hunter then replied, "I think I still have room for dessert." Then he sucked the warlock's lower lip, then proceeded to relish the inside of his lover's mouth with his tongue, while Magnus caressed his back. Alec moved his leg from a kneeling position to directly laying on his boyfriend. Then Magnus paused their kiss and said, while caressing Alec's hair, "I guess we can go for a second round." They went under the covers and made sweet love. This was the first of many breakfasts in bed that Alec shared with Magnus. It became their special thing. Every now and then, Magnus made him breakfast in bed, and he showed his gratitude by making sweet love to him for dessert. The end. Okay. I just realized that you can't see me at all in this video because I don't have the lights on in my room. Whoops. Let's go. I also don't have pants on. Whoops. I'll just... This is fine. Okay. Taylor. Unmute yourself, damn it.
Yeah.
What did you think?
It was good.
It was hard to read for me because
Like reading.
not even just that. The punctuation was not good. It was all like one giant paragraph, which if you read this while I was reading it, you would know that, and I don't know, it's a good story, but